you see these women, whether it's showing unrealistic views of what their body looked like postpartum. And then let's say this woman, painting a picture for you guys, this woman late night scrolling, she's just feeling so out of her body. Everything is new, especially if she's a first time mom. We yearn postpartum to feel like ourselves again, but we're expected to go back into the world, oftentimes back into the workforce, and show up as if we didn't just experience insane amount of physical changes. People get more support recovering from an ACL surgery than they do giving birth.
Welcome to Influence to Death, your guide for navigating the wild world of wellness influencing. Hi, and welcome to this episode of Influence to Death. I am Victoria Lafont.
I'm Hannah Wright, and today we have a guest on the podcast, Brooke Cates, who is a pioneer in pre- and postnatal fitness. Brooke launched the Bloom Method in 2013 and then the first ever pre- and postnatal online fitness studio, Studio Bloom, in 2018. She's on a mission to offer a holistic approach to pre- and postnatal fitness that prioritizes safe, effective movement and personalized support. Her goal is simple: to empower women to feel strong, confident, and supported throughout their journey to motherhood. Through innovative programs and educational resources, Brooke strives to reshape the conversation around pregnancy and postpartum health, providing women with the tools they need to thrive. Her approach is rooted in a deep understanding of movement science, anatomy, and holistic wellness, allowing her and her team to offer tailored programs that meet the unique needs of each individual. We are so excited to have you here, Brooke.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you guys so much. I'm super happy to be here. I can't wait to dive into this conversation. It's going to be a juicy one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just FYI, if people want to get a hold of us, you can find us on Instagram at Influence to Death. You can email us with comments. I mean, I'll take even constructive feedback if people want to. We might have you on the show to let everyone know your constructive feedback at influencetodeath@gmail.com. And then on Substack, we're Influence to Death. And yeah, same. I am so excited that you're here today to share your expertise with a field that has been very heavily influenced. And it seems like a lot of that has probably resulted in neutral and unfortunately some negative effects for people. So I'm excited to get your take on that.
I think that it is an incredibly saturated, niched market, right? The pre and postnatal fitness space, and postnatal specifically, it's almost like everywhere you turn, someone is giving you some level of advice on how to move your body, what is safe, what is not safe, what's going to hurt you, what you should be doing, shouldn't be doing. And you're right, Victoria, it causes so much confusion. I really do. And I think that sometimes the intent behind the initial share of information is there's no ill intent, hopefully, but it causes so much confusion because we have non-experts sharing expert knowledge that is super confusing. And so you then find people like myself, and oftentimes we're trying to clean up the mess. And that can be really hard when you're talking about women being in their bodies, expecting their bodies to feel or look a certain way. And social media is just it's a beast, man. It is such a beast. So yeah.
Especially in that time, that very kind of sensitive time postpartum. Like, I'm speaking as a mom who went through, postpartum, and it was kind of a struggle. And being on Instagram and seeing postpartum influencers talking about postpartum fitness and doing things a certain way, and you're very kind of vulnerable, I feel like, in that space, and very easily influenced. You're sleep deprived, you're like desperate, no one is really guiding you. You leave your, follow-up OB checkup, a month postpartum or whatever. They don't tell you what you should be doing for fitness or to help your core heal, your pelvic floor heal. Like, no one even mentions those words. So I feel like you are very rare because you have the knowledge and experience and a very balanced view that is really lacking with social media, postpartum fitness, like the fit mom influencers.
100%. I think that you say the influence is real in early postpartum because of the vulnerability. And it's so true. I mean, you think of a woman 2 days postpartum, nursing or bottle feeding her baby. And in the middle of the night, she starts to scroll, right? Because she's trying to stay awake so that she can nurse or bottle feed her baby. She's scrolling. And what is she subjected to in these scrolls? So many, there's such a mix, first of all, of these content creators and influencers and really just people sharing their experiences. But the problem is that social media is so fake. It really is. I've experienced it myself where even the most quote unquote real influencer is still sharing fake information. They're not really being as real as we know them to be in real life. And so you see these women, whether it's showing unrealistic views of what their body looked like postpartum. And then let's say this woman, painting a picture for you guys, this woman late night scrolling, she's just feeling so out of her body in those first 2 days. Everything is new, especially if she's a first time mom. And I think we yearn postpartum to feel like ourselves again because we're no longer pregnant. We're expected to go back into the world, oftentimes back into the workforce, and show up as if we didn't just experience insane amount of physical changes to carry and grow our baby. And then really trauma is experienced in the birth, whether I'm not saying that birth isn't beautiful, but it is a traumatic experience physically and emotionally and mentally. And then we're thrown back in the world. And like you said, there's no support. People get more support recovering from an ACL surgery than they do giving birth, whether vaginally or via cesarean, from a baby.
Like a sprained ankle.
How fucked up is that? Excuse my language, but not really. Because it's like, that is so fucked up. And honestly, as women, we should be fucking pissed about that. Like that is infuriating. And so we become so vulnerable. And then we're subjected to these women. Sure, maybe their intention is just like, I want to motivate someone. Awesome. Motivate it not in your bikini and your flat belly, because that is so not the norm for everyone.
We found
and it does more harm than good.
Pictures on Instagram of women with like very stage ready, I'm using air quotes here, postpartum bodies that I put some screenshots in the show notes that we'll share we're kind of focusing on the Fit Mom tag. There's probably more than just that, but that's like a 2 million person movement right now. I mean, it's unreal. I haven't even had a baby. I don't look like that. And I'm a strong ass fit person. Like it is very unrealistic.
Well, look, I think if you really understand why certain people like that look the way they look, why someone may quote unquote bounce back from a pregnancy, we can look at a lot of factors, right? How old is this person, first of all? If you're a 40-year-old woman or a 38-year-old woman who just had a baby looking at a 29-year-old fit influencer mom, huge difference here, you guys. Also, what is that fit influencer's past? Have they been a gymnast since they were 2 years old? So their body knows nothing but muscle tone, and their physique was rock solid before they ever got pregnant. And then they just maintained that. And then of course they're going to quote unquote bounce back. And I'm putting that in quotations because I loathe that term, but it is a term most women are familiar with. And it's just so unrealistic and it's detrimental. It makes me think of all the women who are concerned about baby blues and postpartum depression. And it's like social media can be just this segue into exactly what most women are petrified of. And it's like we do it to ourselves unknowingly because we're kind of like just part of the environment, right? Like social media is just the norm. So all of us, I mean, I do it all the time where I find myself scrolling and I'm like, put your phone down. Like there is a life to live. Like stop paying attention to the life happening in someone's squares and let's be present in our own life, right? But yeah, I think just the visuals that we see from a fit mom influencer can be detrimental enough. And we haven't even begun to dive into the actual, I guess it's guidance and information that some of these people are sharing. They're creating their own apps, they're creating programs. And I think it's important to say that I am someone who believes in abundance. I think that we all have the ability and the birthright to do the work that we are meant to do in the world. So by all means, I think if you want to have a fitness app, have a fitness app. I don't really believe in my competitors being competitors. They're teammates of mine. We all just kind of like share our work differently. But when you are a content creator or an influencer, or even if you don't want to utilize those terms, if you are a person who has a lot of followers on social media because people love watching you and the life that you share, and you get pregnant and you love to exercise and you see an opportunity to monetize these things, your love for exercise and your pregnancy and postpartum journey, and then you launch a program or an app with no, even some of these people even have a level of a certification or an education. But what I'm getting at and what I think is often missing is experience. Just because you have a certification or 10 certifications and you yourself got yourself through a movement and fitness journey from pregnancy through postpartum, that does not mean that you can help the nuanced of women that come through and the way that we all carry pregnancy different, all carry postpartum different. And that's not just physical, it can be emotional, mental. How do you handle someone that's carrying birth trauma and their pelvis can't get into better alignment because their body is physically holding birth trauma? Is that even something that comes up for you? Do you know how to refer out to them? I just think that because I've been doing this for so long, I can analyze these things. And it's for me, it's less about the fit influencer. And I'm not trying to attack these people. I just worry about the moms that I am in service to, the reason that I do this work. And it's scary. It's like the Wild West out there.
Hannah, did you feel that after you gave birth? Were you like on social media, like, oh my God, what?
Oh my gosh, yes. It was, I didn't know how to prepare for that. You know, prior to being pregnant, I saw mom influencers on social media. And I was always really fascinated with, one, how they had the time to be doing all those things with like 4 kids. And not having a kid, I was like, well, maybe they just have all this free time. And then I have 1 kid and I'm like, how the hell are they doing this? What is this life? This isn't real. And I feel like I am a pretty balanced person. I'm not easily influenced. And like, I was comparing myself, you know, and I had a hard time postpartum, and it was during the pandemic. So I didn't have a lot of interaction. And so I was on social media more. And for me, I was scared to do anything to heal my core. I had a C-section. I had the separation of the abdominal muscles some. And it wasn't until a year later that I actually began doing any work to try to heal that. I mean, honestly, I was so overwhelmed that I didn't even have the emotional space to like even look at my body or think about healing my body at all. Like, I don't even think I couldn't even look in the mirror like at my midsection for like almost a year and a half, just because it was so foreign to me. But it was made worse definitely by seeing like the Fit Mom influencers. And we'll talk about this in a minute. They've actually studied this, and these motivational posts don't actually make people feel better. They make you feel worse, and they affect your mental health. And it's definitely a mess. Like you said, it's a wild, wild west, and it's like all this information. And for me, I know a lot about nutrition, but fitness is not my expertise. And so you see these moms with these very successful apps and followings, and you're like, oh, they must know what they're doing. And then, you try to find their bio or like any kind of information on them. And you're like, do they actually have any like, do they know what they're doing? Surely they must, because people are paying them a bunch of money, and it's really confusing to see all of that, for sure. And it's not helpful at all.
I just have to say, because people are listening, Brooke, I feel like sometimes when Hannah speaks, or like when we're talking about this, I can just see like fumes coming off the top of your head.
It's
which I think is a positive. It's like I can tell like you're so passionate about this, and for me, it's like the reason that I'm really excited to hear more and more of what you have to say is because of that experience piece that you're talking about. It's like when we're going to go through the template that we run for the podcast, like we're going to talk about the history and our bias and the evidence and the takeaway and like that. But there aren't many people who can be like, okay, yeah, let's look at the literature, like the research literature, and also having people in front of you and working with them is a level of evidence that it's overlooked a lot, and is especially important with a topic like this because nobody gives a shit, one, in science about women, and it's just starting, and two, especially women who've had a baby. It's even more factors that research can't control for. My understanding, at least in the research literature, is they didn't want to control for our cycles. And then think about the control that they would have to put in for changes that happen when we're pregnant and in postpartum. So I really, really appreciate the fact that you're like, there has to be some level of clinical experience that people have in order to gain expertise in this. You can't just go to school for it and get a training. Like, you have to work with people.
I mean, how many people listening would choose a surgeon who's been in school for 15 years, but has never operated on someone? That's not the surgeon I'm going with, right? Like, and for some reason, the fitness industry is kind of a shit show in and of itself. Like it's a completely unregulated industry. And I think that's important for people to know. They don't realize that, but that means that your fitness coach could have 15, 20 years of experience, or they could have 1 week of experience. And these are our bodies. This is like, if you experience an injury and then you're forced to scale back your workouts, you can't meet these goals that you want to meet, whatever that is for the individual, you're forced into physical therapy. I look forward to the day that someone comes in and some agency finally regulates the fitness industry, because I think we'll stop seeing so much misinformation, so much everyone can just have an app and it's okay because, and here's my thing again, Hannah, you kind of touched on this in your own journey, but first of all, most moms, especially postpartum, they are so inundated. They're overstimulated, they're overloaded, everything. So you're right. If they have this influencer that they've followed, let's say for a year, and they really resonate with them, whatever their lifestyle, and then they notice that they have a postnatal app. Oh, I can heal my core. And maybe I have diastasis and maybe I have a little bit of leakage. My favorite influencer has a program and she's running a sell on it, and she has 1.2 million followers. We live in a day and age where, I'm going to say this, we are allowing ourselves to be so dumbed down that we think a 1.2 million follower count equates to someone who can expertly guide me to heal my body's dysfunction. And what happens? And the reason I know so much about what I'm saying is because we hear this all the time with new members into our app, is the woman feels helpless. The woman is the one that suffers, not the app, not the influencer. They keep racking in more people that are convinced that they're an expert in what they do and that their app is going to give them, the individual purchasing the app, the same body that the influencer has. So that's the other like really messed up piece, is that most women are trying to attain a similar physique as the individual that they're purchasing from. And then when they can't, or they can't figure out how to heal their diastasis, they never feel their lower core engage, but they're doing all the workouts. They show up every day. Most of the time, that influencer does not have one-on-one support. Sometimes there's a Facebook group, but can they really even answer your question if they don't have the expertise? And then the woman is left feeling helpless and alone and like a failure. Like I can't even heal my own body. And that is so tragic to me as someone who has given my entire life to helping women feel empowered in their body, no matter what your body looks like, what stage of pregnancy and postpartum. Why can't we learn to have grace for our bodies? I feel like most women, we will get to a point, maybe in our like mid to late 60s, where we will look back and be so ashamed of the lack of gratitude and grace and love that we gave our bodies in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And I just wish that women could have an ounce of that now in this present moment, because it would change everything. And follow your favorite influencers. If they light you up and they don't make you feel bad, follow them. Just maybe, like you said, do your research. Don't think that because they look great postpartum, you're going to do their program and get the same results, because we all have our own stuff. And make sure you have a vetted team of experts that can help you when things show up. If you hit a roadblock, can that team of experts that where you're spending your money and trusting in your body's experience, can that team of expert help you to be pulled out of that? Yeah, for me, it's all about the moms. And I just feel that we're bombarded with so much already that the last thing we need is more shame, body shame. The fact that you said you couldn't look in the mirror for like a year to a year and a half, like that makes me so sad. Like I look at you and you are so beautiful and you are such a ray of light. And to think that you were like clouded by whatever you were feeling. And sometimes it's hormonal, right? You talk about, when we think about the hormones, and you said we were going to talk about kind of the study that they did around like looking at fit mom influencers in the early days postpartum. Heck, maybe it's even 8 months postpartum. If you're a nursing mom, you rely on your oxytocin to help your breast milk production. You rely on having low cortisol to produce breast milk. And there are a lot of things that can come into play with that. But if you're someone who's constantly being fed these images, even like maybe a fit mom healing postpartum faster than you're healing, and she's like back to her workouts, and you're just like, why is that not me? Think about, yet simultaneously, all you want to do is nurse and breastfeed your baby until your baby's 2. So all of a sudden your milk starts to tank and you're like, what's going on? So now you have 2 things up against you. You don't love your body. You can't move your body the way that you want to. No one's there to support and help you. You just keep scrolling and seeing more people like, achieving what you want to achieve. And now you're even more stressed because your breast milk is dwindling. And oh my goodness, is my journey in motherhood and nourishing my baby going to look different? And then to talk about the support, we don't even have the support to connect those dots for us. So we're just left to try to figure it out ourselves. And in most of the time, I think instead of figuring out, we just shame ourselves. So it's just this cycle of like almost like self-hatred that if we just had more like expert support for women in general, especially postpartum women, my God, it'd be a totally different life. Really, it would.
I wonder, because I'm a cynical person, like when you talk about the influencers who are maybe their motivation is pure and they're just trying to provide positive motivation, but I wonder if they are in that same space you just described, Brooke, and they are sharing these, perfect photos and everything as a form of therapy for themselves to help them kind of get out of that same mindset,
That's definitely a positive and interesting lens to look at it from. I think where I immediately go to is, if you look quote unquote amazing postpartum and you aesthetically have this body that is causing other people to feel bad about their body, what are you bummed about? Like from a body perspective, like how is this therapy? Like, because you can show other people how good you look. Like, I guess that's always something that I've struggled with anyways. Even the influencers and content creators on the other spectrum, these ones that I love it, they're showing like the reality of women's bodies. When I sit down, I have rolls on my stomach. When I'm in direct sunlight in my bathing suit, I have all this cellulite on my butt. But look, if I go inside, I look great. Great, right? In quotations. What does that mean without the cellulite? But I even struggle with that because I'm like, what is it about women that we feel like we have to be so validated by what our body looks like in the dark, in the light, under clothes? Like, men are not doing this.
That's true.
Men are not almost like being so raw about who they are or what their body looks like to make other men feel good. So I guess I just go to this like psychology place of like, why can't we just love our bodies? Because it's really the patriarchy that has done this to us in the first place. And we continue to feed the patriarchy by, even when we're like, well, I'm going to be a fit influencer that shows women what cellulite is. I don't know. You're still kind of like feeding into the patriarchy of how we value ourselves is based on what our body looks like.
Yeah, and it's an excellent marketing technique, like both sides, like you're saying. It's like they're hitting points of insecurity or, like a problem that needs to be solved of two different populations of people. So, I mean, I have a marketing kind of focused brain, but it does come up for me where I'm like, I mean, I can see that in my own Instagram feed with the posts that I post. I don't know, Hannah, if you've noticed that. It's like, I feel like your posts are highly informative. Like you do a great job with that. But I like shy away from posting like drawing in based on pain because it's like, well, wait a second. I don't want to have followers because of that. It's like, I want to have followers because, I'm like actually helping versus drawing people in because of some type of like psychological, like full scale body positivity, putting my body out there in that way, making people, like wish that they had this body. It's like they are manipulative, even though, a theme that comes up on this podcast over and over is like, maybe it's not even conscious that people are doing that. They just notice I post this type of post, I put out this type of content, I get the most engagement. So of course, that's what they're going to start to post. Absolutely. And it definitely seems like that is a huge part of influencing that we're trying to cover on this podcast. It's like these people aren't bad, but man, this system is absolutely degrading all of us. Men too. It's all of us.
For sure. I think you just made a great point actually, because I think when we take several steps back and look at all of the quote unquote issues that we may have with the world around us, it is almost always the system. It is rarely the human, right? Like we innately want to do good, which is why I say like, even to Hannah's point, like these women showing this, I do think that they're just trying to normalize that like maybe you don't have to be a like, woe is me, motherhood is so hard, because that's another narrative that I don't always jive with. Like we chose to have children. We can do hard things. I tell my 5-year-old that all the time. Like they make us stronger. So when motherhood's hard, strap on your boots and have fun with it. Like you can control your attitude, and maybe that's all in some situations. But I think that this influence to death thing, it's almost like we've been put into the system. And look, you can look at it from like a monetary space. Like I could really go there and talk about how we're just all imprisoned to like wake up every day and work and do this stuff that like, because we have to pay the bills and we have to pay taxes and that whole thing. So
we know.
So these influencers, they see an opportunity. Yes. And I'm not saying they see an opportunity with like taking advantage of women. I'm saying they see an opportunity where a platform can allow them to reach so many more women or people than they've ever been able to reach and influence. And then it also does, I think, empower women. It does give women this sense of like, well, my husband's at work all day. I'm at home with the kids and I can make money and feel good and like have people comment that I'm doing a good job. So I do think it is important to talk about that because the human is not trying to do a bad job. They're just yeah, it's like they're just missing something. And, you know, some women might say, but I'm a stay at home mom and I have 500,000 followers. And how am I supposed to get the experience to work with women? I can't get away from my children. And that's where I would say that's because collaboration is the way forward. When we as women learn that collaboration is like how we're going to new earth the hell out of our current situation. Yeah. So there's a lot of holes and a lot of, I think, reasons that this happens. But ultimately, it comes back to, I think, why you guys do this podcast, which is how do we create better discernment in individuals taking in the information that we are all constantly bombarded with.
Mm-hmm. Right? It's like people are starting to speak to this. We're trying to do it in a way that's like our own experiences and telling people, you know, here's some actual research. Let's check that out. Like, let's look at all these different angles. And part of me is like, if we can be part of a movement of making discernment trendy and of making bias consciousness trendy and of making like rational thinking trendy, hell yeah, I'm going to jump on that. It's like my dream. But anyway, so should we jump in? Like, let's talk about like what is the history of postpartum fitness. And this is interesting. Like before the show, we talked a little bit about this topic because it's scant. There's just not much. There's a little bit that we found, a little bit of information about, I do want to just say, what is likely a really deep tradition that there are cultures who have used postpartum therapy, postpartum strategies for women for thousands of years, but we don't have that in our culture right now. So we will include that kind of information in the show notes, but it's not part of our current culture.
Yeah, unfortunately. Victoria, I will jump in and say that so for our listeners, what Victoria is talking about, I think specifically is like belly binding type things, right?
Yeah,
For example,
that's the
that's
main
one
technique that I know of. It's like,
yep. Yeah. And I will tell you that there are a lot of, especially home birth midwives, that will come over and do belly binding for their patients. And I think that it is such a beautiful, supportive way to really, from a holistic space, it's about like almost like wrapping the womb and helping for those organs to kind of like gently come back to their side. Their normal size. I would also say like another modality that I love is Mayan abdominal massage. And that can be really, really beautiful postpartum. Again, and just like ensuring that the uterus kind of landed back where it needs to be, because sometimes it'll be too far right or too far left. And like a Mayan abdominal massage can just be so supportive in making sure that all of your organs post pregnancy have gone back into this place that is going to support your digestion, support your menstrual cycle, all of these things that need to continue postpartum. And you're right. I think the average woman just doesn't have access to it. Now, it's interesting being in the movement and fitness world from a rehabilitative space postpartum. It's interesting to like talk about belly binding and then think about what we offer on our app. For example, we have a program called the Rehab Code, and it is safe enough for women to do as early as literally day one postpartum. Now, every time I say that, I always say there is no pressure for you to start. But the reason we do say that is because, believe it or not, you guys, there are some really type A athletes out there that day one, they have got to do something. And I'd much rather them do something that's rehabilitative than something that's going to harm themselves. And so, but this rehabilitative program, it is so gentle and so safe that it almost is this direct connection to belly binding, but we teach the individual how to utilize their own muscles because we have this transverse abdominal muscle in our core, and it literally mimics a corset, which if you were going to have a belly binding service done, they wrap from the back. They start at the spine and they kind of wrap in this corset-like mentality. And it really helps the individual reintegrate breath, which helps to bring the deep core and the pelvic floor online. And we, of course, progress to prepare them for a return to exercise, et cetera. But it's so beautiful to think that even from like a movement and fitness modality, there are ways that you can get creative to say, well, even if you didn't do any belly binding postpartum, you supported your body so beautifully in the first couple of weeks where you were utilizing your own breath and your own transverse abdominal recruitment to really help to gently turn things back on or encourage your organs to, move back to their normal placement. But this is still something that is also new outside of the myoabdominal massage and the belly binding. Those have been around in other cultures, as you know, for centuries and centuries. But in the US, we're just so behind. And I think you guys found a lot more prenatal kind of stuff on exercise guidelines. And then, I think one of the most interesting things that the three of us could do, as well as any listeners, is when you think about postpartum exercise guidelines or exercise support, however you want to look at it, or return to exercise, think about your mother, your grandmother, and your great grandmother's generation. How many of us could probably say, oh, yeah, my mom tells me that she, leaks all the time. She's never like loved her belly after her baby. Oh, my grandmother, her back hurt from the time she was done giving birth to her fifth baby for the rest of her life. And it's like we as women it's almost as if we've been taught that that's just the price of childbirth. That's the price of being a mother. And to be honest with you guys, that type of messaging is why I sit here today, because I started doing this work 7 years before I even knew I was going to become a mom, but 7 years before I had my own pregnancy. And it was this narrative around motherhood, pregnancy, and birth break you, and you will never be the same again. And just, Eve in the garden, it's just the price you pay kind of thing. And I was like, oh, hell no, it's not. I'm here to like empower women. So that was my goal. And I think that we've just always been okay with it. And so now finally we're starting more women are on board with, we need to have a smarter return to exercise. I mean, the fact that women don't even see their OBGYN until 6 weeks, sometimes 8 or 9 weeks, depending on how backed up that OBGYN is, postpartum is so detrimental. I personally had a home birth. So my midwife was at my home 24 hours after my birth. She was at my home 2 days after my birth. And she would start to kind of spread it apart. But this went on for 3 to 6 weeks postpartum where she was coming to my home. I get that that is not the average, but women still deserve better. And I won't stop saying that. Women should be having a postpartum visit sooner than 6 weeks postpartum. And at the 6-week postpartum visit, 9 times out of 10, the doctor will say, oh, you look good. You can just resume exercise. That OB is not asking, well, what do you want to do for exercise? Have you done any type of rehabilitative, movements and reintegrations in the past 6 weeks? Oftentimes women are told to just rest. Now, I believe in rest. I think the rest is huge, but we don't rest and then return to our favorite box gym at 6 to 8 weeks postpartum. We rest, we rehabilitate, we have grace for our body. We understand what our bodies have been through, and we utilize the 6 to 8 weeks before clearance. And again, there's, a lot of people will say, well, what if I want to exercise before that? Sometimes it's about your body. And if you're bleeding still, we don't want to resume exercise if your wound from your placenta is still healing. But when we can have more grace with the body, and if women had more support around guidelines, which are so sparse even in 2024, with rehabilitating the body, women would return to exercise feeling better, feeling stronger, and they would avoid so much injury, whether it was immediate injury or sometimes a year or two down the road. Sometimes injury doesn't show up immediately, but it can be a subsequent of like, because we didn't rehab the body. And, I guess I'll wrap all of this up with telling you guys that 8 years ago, my niece was born in Uganda. And let's see, 8 years ago, I had just launched, I think I had just opened the brick and mortar studio in Colorado. So feet were wet. We had a lot of women, but we weren't doing the app yet. And I will never forget that my sister-in-law, we had a conversation. And of course, I was like, well, how are you taking care of your body postpartum? She was like, funny, you ask that. We were on FaceTime and she pulls out this little booklet. And in Uganda, which most of us here in the US think that Uganda is a third world country, they had sent her home with a 15 plus page booklet on rehabilitative postpartum and pelvic floor, like core and pelvic floor exercises. That was 8 years ago, you guys.
Wow.
I don't know a single hospital that provides that. I don't know a single midwife or doula that provides that to their postpartum clients.
No,
It's just
100% not.
no. Now they're starting to slowly get on board with nutrition, but there's still this massive push to rest. Don't do anything. Don't do anything. Just rest. Eat well. And I get that. But you're setting your patient or your client up for so much almost failure when you don't supply them with a reconnection to their body postpartum. So we've got the history, we're kind of living it right now. Like it hasn't really shifted is my point. There has always been a lack of postpartum rehabilitative and exercise support and guidelines. And there still is such a massive gap. And I hope that I can be one of many, many women who starts to create the shift in the system, because again, it's a system issue. It's not an individual issue. Most OBGYNs would say, I would love to have something like that, but I don't have it. And I also don't have time to vet your app. So I can't see, it's like this, there are just so many problems in the systems.
So you mentioned before, because you are a pioneer in this, like you're saying, there is nothing, the history is now. Like there's really no history. I mean, I can attest to that. Like I went into my postpartum checkup at the hospital clinic, even was with a midwife, and I couldn't even feel my stomach. I mean, for a long time, for almost 2 years, and there was no advice, no, like, what do you do? And so for you, how was it for you when you started teaching this stuff? How was that received? I think you mentioned something that I thought was really interesting, that you got some negative reactions.
Yeah.
Initially.
So
from who?
I like to tell people this.
Like,
yeah. Ooh,
hang
the
on
juice.
a second.
Yeah. So this is more pertaining to pregnancy. And I think it all stems from fear and liability and right. Like that's like a whole nother rabbit hole. But really this all shifted when men came into the birthing space. They removed midwives primarily from birth, shifted to hospitals. This was in like the late 1800s. And of course, men are going to teach us to be fearful because they're fearful. They're disconnected with our births because they're not a part of it, right? Unless they're being a supportive partner. And so, yeah, when I first started doing this back in like 2013, Instagram wasn't the beast that it was. And we had a pretty big organic following. And I would post videos of my clients doing a combination of a technique that we utilize we call it a belly pump. And it's essentially the merging of a true diaphragmatic breath and a deep core and pelvic floor recruitment or engagement. And so you get this really like visually stimulating view of a woman that looks like she's expanding her belly and then almost like making her baby disappear. Now, it would always vary from woman to woman. I kind of said this earlier. For example, if I had a gymnast who I was training during pregnancy, chances are, I could show you guys a video that we should probably post. This was a client of mine, a one-on-one client back in like probably 2014, maybe 2015. I should post it again because it literally looks like she goes from being third trimester pregnant to fourth trimester, just had her baby. But she was like a fitness professional who, was on stage at like fitness competitions and stuff. So her muscle memory was insane and her muscle strength was insane. And so that got me a lot of bite back, I guess I would say. Yes, we kind of went viral, whatever that is back then. The Today Show interviewed us. The Today Show gave me 2 interviews. The Doctor's TV show, it was, I mean, in fact, I actually just got pinged the other day that some UK based publication rewrote the story from 2017 and just pushed it on Yahoo News like 2 weeks ago. I was like, what is going on? Why are we still out? At this point, almost every pre and postnatal specialist, expert, and or fit influencer is teaching some level of our, what we call our belly pump. So it's become such a normal technique at this point that I can't believe that it's still getting so much coverage. And yet it is, because I think what this tells us is that even though sometimes in our small worlds, it seems like there's so much information and everyone knows that, for example, like there should be a difference between injury-based diastasis and a normal level of separation and diastasis that your body can deal with, women don't. And that's, again, it comes back to the information is so convoluted that no one knows what is real and what is not real. Some people are pushing fear around movement and some people are pushing empowerment. And so then there's this in between of like, well, who do I listen to? Am I like Hannah? Am I watching people who are telling me that if I have diastasis, even if that person isn't truly defining what diastasis is for me, because that's another massive issue. There's this term diastasis recti that's thrown around, and the average woman doesn't even understand that you had a diastasis before you got pregnant. And so when you tell a woman that, they're like, they probably do this like, whoa, 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 what kind of information have I understood as truth that may not even be truth just because I now understand what diastasis is in a different way. So
we should explain it really quickly to people. Like if you just feel the midline of your body. Well, Brooke, do you want to?
Yeah.
let you explain this because you're the expert. I'm like diving into this and you could probably do a much better job than me.
You know, I think that this is the way we describe it. And we actually get a lot of flack. You talk about getting some flack. We get flack from who I consider colleagues, people who are in the space that we are in. They don't like that we have taken this term diastasis recti and we look at it in 2 phases, as a normal, natural occurring diastasis recti and a more injury-based diastasis recti. We've had pelvic PTs be like, you coined that term. And I'm like, thank God somebody did, because women deserve to be educated properly.
Mm-hmm.
But it is basically that you are born. This is how I tell it to women, especially when they have babies. When you are born, you have a separation between your rectus abdominis muscles. Those are your 6-pack muscles. So there is a separation. And the existence of that separation is the connective tissue, which is called the linea alba. The rectus muscles attach into that connective tissue. It is like a band of connective tissue. It's kind of like almost like a resistance band or a rubber band.
Right down the middle of your stomach. So it's
right down the middle.
3 abs on one side and the 3 abs on the other side.
Yep. And it goes from your sternum all the way down to the top of your pelvis. And so it's a really long band. Your belly button sits directly on top of that connective tissue. So the belly button, you can also look at that as the belly button is always going to be a weaker point. So some women will say, well, postpartum, my separation was wider at my belly button. Well, that's because that point of the connective tissue was always weaker. Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's fast forward it. You always have this level of separation, and your level of separation between those rectus muscles is going to be different based on your body composition, your body type, etc. And then you get pregnant. Your belly has to expand. Our bodies are so wise, you guys. Diastasis recti or diastasis recti simply means the separation between the rectus muscles. So first of all, we've taken this term and exacerbated it to place fear and ultimately monetize people buying programs, really, if you want me to go there, because we pack fear in something that is just the separation of muscles because a band of connective tissue exists. But when you get pregnant, the belly stretches. Again, this is all dependent on your body type. A petite woman's belly is going to expand much less than a larger person, and it just varies.
Yeah, I'm just thinking somebody who has like a connective tissue disorder, like they're probably going to have more stretching. That's a population that we've researched a lot. So I'm just
No, that's
thinking
a
outside
great
the box.
point. A short torso versus a long torso, right? Like this all variables. So, but what happens is the belly has to grow. We want to make space for baby. And our intelligent body, the female body, that connective tissue is built to withstand the stretching. So that's what we mean when we talk about natural occurring diastasis, is that if you can hit certain markers, if you are a pregnant woman who can move through pregnancy with minimal coning, which means a coning of pressure pushing down that midline, if you've seen that midline kind of bulge, that we refer to that as coning in my industry. And that just tells us that you're doing a move, whether it's a functional movement of, sitting up off of a couch, or you're doing an exercise that creates pressure because your core is a pressurized system. That pressure is constantly changing. It changes from when you sit to stand. Most of the time you don't even realize it's happening. But again, a normal thing. But when you are pregnant and that space is now stretched, it's more vulnerable to almost like the pressure escaping from that area, right? When you don't manage the pressure. The way you manage the pressure is during certain movements, you kind of counteract it by recruitment of the pelvic floor and the core. We teach this through an intentional exhale because our breath is like the building block of a strong core. And can really guide us to some incredible core engagement. If you manage that pressure, you're less likely to cone. And so you're not weakening that connective tissue. The more you cone, I never want women to be scared of coning. You're probably going to see it a couple of times. Thank your body for giving you that signal. And then next time you sit up off the couch, engage and then sit up. Because this is actually an opportunity to learn how to properly engage your core postpartum and for the rest of your life, subsequent pregnancies, et cetera. But what happens and gets people into this injury-prone state of diastasis is there's a lot of weakness that happens to that connective tissue. And that can happen. Oftentimes it happens through a lot of pressure mismanagement. So every time you mismanage the pressure, it's just like, someone's pushing on that connective tissue. Well, think about it in terms of a rubber band. If your grandma has used a rubber band on a bag of chips for 45 years and she's like, well, honey, here, you use this rubber band. You're like, I don't know about that, old trusty. I don't think I can trust that rubber band anymore, right? So it's kind of the same. The more subsequent pregnancies you have, of course, the more vulnerable that connective tissue becomes, even if you are wonderful at managing your pressure. But there are things that we can do. And I talk about it to scale because, one, women deserve to understand how our bodies work. But two, we often forget about the innate magic of our bodies. Our bodies are not designed to carry babies and then be broken. Mm-hmm. Our bodies are broken from carrying babies because we don't have the support and the knowledge that we deserve to take care of our own bodies, period. And so that's kind of the diastasis in a nutshell and why we don't just say, everyone's going to have diastasis. Well, yes, you will. But your diastasis may be totally fine with just, smart rehabilitation and a smart return to exercise. Other women, due to things outside of their control, sometimes it's just that they didn't have the information, may have a more severe injury-based diastasis. And those women deserve love and support and guidance and the right, not just program, but like it's one of the reasons why we offer one-on-one support. And when I say one-on-one support, I am audio messaging and video messaging my responses to these women. But it's one of the reasons we do it. And it's free. It's included with every membership because no pregnancy and postpartum is the same. And women deserve, like I said earlier, if they hit a roadblock, maybe they were seeing and feeling great results, and then all of a sudden something changes and they show up to a workout and like, ooh, well, that didn't feel right. Or I'm not seeing the results I want. My low core, there's pressure. They deserve to have someone who is willing to listen to them and really assess all of their history plus their current stuff to understand how they can see the results they deserve. And that's where I come in. I tell everyone I am results driven. The more information you can give me about what you've been doing for the past 2 to 3 years if you've been having babies that long, plus what you're currently doing and what is not working, that's how we can kind of like put all of these pieces together. And just to circle it all back to the influencer thing, I just know that the average influencer program is not offering that. And so women get put in a cycle of, I call it the hamster wheel of healing. And it's just detrimental. I mean, it doesn't that sound horrible?
That absolutely describes so much of what we see, you know, in like in nutrition or in medicine, where it's like people just like, they try this thing. It's like detox harder, eliminate harder, fast harder, you know, carnivore hard, like anything, keto harder. There's actually we're going to have him on the podcast next month. Mike T. Nelson is this hilarious, incredibly intelligent metabolic guy. And he's like, got this bumper sticker that's adjacent to this. And he's like, why keto? Life is hard enough. Like, you don't need to go that hard.
You could have a whole episode on just unpacking that. Seriously, like we've got to be easier to ourselves, allow our lives to be easier in this crazy, chaotic, modern world that I believe we all chose to be here. So I'm not complaining. And it is a beautiful world to live in, but it's chaotic and stressful enough, you know?
It's wild though. So like, okay, Hannah, like when you were discharged from the hospital, you didn't get any postpartum rehabilitation. Yeah.
No.
So it's like,
and I had a C-section, you know, like an unplanned C-section. So I was not prepared for that. You know, I couldn't even I had to sleep in a chair for like 2 weeks because I couldn't get in and out of bed. You know, we have a little bit of a lower like IKEA bed and I couldn't do it. I couldn't like move. And there was nothing provided to me, but I was super focused on all the messaging I saw around diastasis and coning and stuff as like a warning sign. And like, if you see that, stop, just rest, don't do anything. Like you can make it worse and then your abs will separate and you'll have to have surgery to like all these things. And so that was in my head. And so I was super fearful. And it's kind of wild, you know, I relied on Googling everything. I was like, is it normal to not be able to actually feel your stomach 18 months postpartum, 2 years postpartum?
Keyword, Hannah. That's why we do SEO at the agency is because to your point, it's like women are scrolling or they're Googling. What if they found information that was really helpful and excellent and accurate and experienced? It's like, that's the dream.
Going back to what you just said, Hannah, about your C-section, what infuriates me is that I guarantee you were told at some point by your doctor or your nurse, don't lift your baby too much. Don't do squats. Don't, like, you're healing, rest. I'm like, how is that functional for a mother who is bottle feeding or nursing her baby, that baby relies on the coddling and love and skin to skin of that mother. A mother, at the very least, let's say someone is bedridden, at the very least, she has to lean back, recline, and sit up. Do you know how much that changes the pressure in the abdomen? Because you essentially just did a sit-up. Sure, you weren't coming straight from the ground, but how many women do jackknife up out of bed? Like, some of these moves that are told to postpartum women, don't do them. You're doing a version of them in your functional life. Don't squat. Cool. So am I pooping standing up right now? Like, you know what I mean? Like it just, I have a 4-year-old at home and I have a newborn. My 4-year-old just fell off of his bike outside. I can't squat down to help him up. I'm just a helpless woman. I got to wave someone down to like, it just doesn't make any sense. And so I just think to myself, if these doctors can be indoctrinated to offer these baseless postpartum guidelines, post a vaginal birth or a C-section, and a cesarean birth is so much more traumatic. You need even more of like a push to make sure you're rehabbing your body. Every single one of your abdominal muscles was cut through. So if these doctors can be required to offer these baseless guidelines, why the heck can we not reinvent this? Why can't there just be, I don't care if it's like, do these 5 exercises, learn how to diaphragmatically breathe and do these 5 exercises. It doesn't have to be crazy, But women deserve to have some level of understanding of how to reconnect with their body and move better. Even if moving is chasing after your 5-year-old, you deserve to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very unfair. I mean, it's doing a severe injustice to women. And I don't understand. I mean, it's the same with, postpartum nutrition or prenatal nutrition, or the advice that you're getting from your medical provider is like severely lacking. And I don't understand what has to be done to make that shift. And I think a lot of times there's just all this gatekeeping because it's like, well, people can't understand this. They don't know. We just have to make a general recommendation that's safe for everybody and blah, blah, blah. Like with you, you're teaching people about diastasis recti as how it should be taught, like the reality of it. And when you started doing that, experts are like, wait, whoa, 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 what are you doing? You can't tell people this. Like, it's but they need to know this. This is really
I had a very well-known pelvic PT tell us that that message is fear-mongering. I said, honey, what is fear-mongering about educating someone? That is the opposite. I think it triggers you because you can't fear-monger if I'm out here educating people, right?
Yeah. Exactly what it is. You can no longer gatekeep that information if someone has those tools to understand them themselves. Like, you don't have to be an expert to be smart enough to understand these things about your body. Yep. Everybody deserves to know how their body functions. And
let's be real, you guys, because that's how I like to show up in the world. I'm a fitness professional. This is not rocket science, you guys. I am legit in an industry that anyone and their mom could be a part of. We don't have the smartest people in this industry, okay? I'm just going to say that. Sorry to say it, but y'all know it's true. Here's the deal. You just got to care. You've just got to do it right, because what you just said, you're like, okay, so if we know that there are aspects of the system where this gatekeeping happens, and changing the system is so hard. Getting OBGYNs to refer out is so hard. Luckily, we have gotten to a point where a lot of OBs will refer to pelvic PTs, which is amazing. But then there's this massive gap with pelvic PT and actually seeing results due to the pelvic PTs and how they deliver exercises. But what happens is, I think more and more women are turning to these influencers, because these influencers are so bringing this back. They're turning to the influencers to get the information. And you guys, I've said to my team all the time, like, if you went to look at the Bloom Method on Instagram, I think we have like 80 something thousand followers. We've been in the 80s for like over a year. And my team will say to me, Brooke, if you would share more about you and your personal life, you would have more followers. And I'm like, well, that's not what I want to do. But people don't want to follow businesses because we've been convinced businesses are trying to get our money, right? That's almost how we see it. But then what happens is we're filtered into these influencers thinking that the influencers have our best interest at hand. I'm like, girlfriend, that influencer would not say hi to you or look the other way if you walked by them in real life, right? Like, come on, let's be real about this. They want your money too. And oftentimes they lack the experience. So you have to value yourselves in a way, like value your money, value yourself, value your time, whatever makes sense to you. But who do you want to trust? Because if you're not going to trust the doctor, who's a good middle person? Maybe it's the influencer, because I do think that there are content creators and influencers out there that they have turned themselves into specialists. I can think of a handful right now that are great. And then there are just way too many that I'm like, if you do one more post about a diastasis safe workout, there is no such thing as a diastasis safe workout, you guys, because it's so individualized. Mm-hmm. If you can do the workout with managing your pressure and keeping your core engaged, that is a safe workout for you, diastasis or no diastasis. But there's a lot of people, colleagues of mine in my industry, that are very clinical and very science oriented. So they only want the information that they share, and the way they base their practice, let's say, is based on these quote unquote research studies.
They're like evidence-based to death.
They are evidence-based to death. You have no idea. I remember one of them years ago, So we talk about the prevention of injury-based diastasis, and that drives people crazy. They're like, you can't prevent. I'm like, you can prevent the injury component. And so it's a guy who does a lot of, you got to love the guys that have these, really strong opinions on women's bodies, and he is great in his own right, but he does a lot of courses for pre and postnatal, like athlete type people. So he trains professionals like myself on athleticism for pre and postnatal. And he said to me, you've got to stop talking about the prevention of injury-based diastasis because there has been no study to show that. And my response was, I do not operate my work in this world and put my clients in a box based on research. Because number one, we know that there is no money. Who the hell is researching any type of prevention right now? Mm-hmm. No one. There's no money in prevention research. And number two, we know that pre and postnatal research is so convoluted because of the liability that sometimes people don't even want to do it because there's too much liability. And number three, I've actually been a part of a research group before. The Blue Method has. You guys, it's a joke. Half of these women don't even show up for the work and they don't care. They still will report it as a peer-reviewed study when there were 50 women involved and 7 of the women gave data. You're like, so we have to start understanding that sometimes anecdotal evidence is actually way more powerful and profound and can teach us so much more than these peer-reviewed studies. It's just the truth. And so I'm a little brazen that way, and I know that not a lot of people are, but yeah,
I think that good clinicians are. It's like,
yes, absolutely.
It's one thing when we started to plan this podcast, Hannah was like, we have both been clinicians. And I was like, oh, right.
It's important.
Yeah, I forget totally. Though, because to me, I'm like, it's so many people's weak leg. I think that's why I focused on it. But like, for instance, not long ago, I was editing, this is just an example that's off topic, but I was editing this immune course, and the guy who wrote the course is way more of a researcher than a clinician. And he was like, when you take this certain supplement, the best way to take it is on an empty stomach. And my brain, I didn't even think research. I was like, you can't take zinc on an empty stomach.
Oh no, it'll make you vomit immediately. Yeah.
But a research study isn't going to teach you that. You know who taught me that were my clients who were like, hey, dummy.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
You told us to take this and we feel like shit.
Yeah.
I mean, that just goes back to the experience. I tell people all the time, my certifications have been great. And in the beginning, they gave me what I needed to start my business and see clients, right? They gave me that, what's the word I'm looking for? My brain just farted. Like,
there's like a validation that it gives you, and like a permission, and it gives you enough to get started for sure.
Totally. But what I've learned from the women that have been vulnerable and are willing to like be my guinea pig and like, let's really dive into these nuanced issues and dysfunctions that are showing up, my clients have taught me far more than my education. And so it's one of the reasons why I'm so pro experience. Like, get your hands on these women and work with them. But I want to circle back really quickly. You were talking about, you guys can edit this out. So I wanted to touch on clinicians. Here we go. I wanted to touch on clinicians and how sometimes, like we were talking about how people can be super clinical and attach everything they do to research studies. But I think when you bring it in with a lens perspective of what you said around these people who maybe are pelvic PTs or OBGYNs, and they're part of this indoctrinated system where they can't freely talk as openly as we can. They may lose their license if they were to say, I don't know, injury-based diastasis can be prevented and research doesn't really matter because the research isn't really there. So it does. It's like it traps them, you know?
And
so
then
I think
it's like people go to influencers are filling a vacuum in that way. It's like a question that keeps coming up for me, which I'm like, okay, I feel like everybody kind of knows where we stand. When we say bias in this podcast, it basically just means like, what are our opinions? So we just try to be transparent with that so people know like, okay, we're going to try and provide all angles of a topic, but like, here's where we're coming from. Not necessarily, we don't say it in a negative way. It's just in a transparent way. I think people know where we stand on this topic, all of us.
Yeah.
So we have a good kind of like, people have a foundation for that now. We're talking about the evidence. There are some research studies, but I think that you're making a point that's really excellent, which is like, you have to look at more than that. And then how do people know who to follow? Right? It's like, there's not a lot of research, even though we did find some. We do need to find someone that has experience. I mean, would that kind of be the main point that you would make, is like find somebody who has actually been working with this population of people?
Yes. And I would add something to that, because you said, how do women know who to follow?
Yeah.
How do they make you feel? How does their content make you feel? Does it make you feel ashamed of your body? Does it make you feel ugly or not enough? Like, does it make you feel like you need to do more to be complete? Are you judging yourself because of their content? Does it make you feel fearful to do things that you love to do? I would probably not follow someone that their content made you feel that way.
Yeah.
Or does their content cause you to be curious about your body and what's going on? Does their content almost get you excited about maybe even an injury that you're currently up against, because you see the potential of growth that can happen and the gift that sometimes an injury can give us, because what we can learn through it? Does their content make you feel empowered in your body? Does it make you feel like you could go to a gym and safely choose the way that you're going to move your body and not feel like you're choosing the wrong thing?
Mm-hmm.
I think that if we chose content based off of whether we felt empowered or disempowered, a lot of things would change, right?
That's a mic drop right there. I think that's a that's a good one.
I have one. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I was going to ask you if you wanted to talk about that Fit Mom study, but go.
Oh, yeah, I do. Before I ask Brooke a question. So the whole reason I wanted to do this episode is because I came across this study for a client that we were researching for. And it's a Fit Mom study. So it's like the only study of this kind where they basically had, I don't know how many people were in it. It was a pretty good sized study, and it's recent. It was just a couple of years ago. And they basically looked at women and how they were exposed to body focused social media and how that affected them. So these are women after having a baby. They're looking at, if you went to the Fit Mom hashtag and you see these influencers. So they had a group of women look at that daily, and then the other group did not. They didn't see any of it.
And then it was 132 women. Like it was a substantial for a study like this.
So what they found was that the women who were exposed to the body focused social media posts, they had higher rates of body satisfaction and an unhealthy relationship with food, which resulted in eating less and also feeling guilt after eating. And these were social media posts that were supposed to be motivational for moms to help them have a good body image, and have positive body image. And watching all of those things actually did the exact opposite. It made moms lose that feeling of empowerment. They looked at their bodies in a negative way. And basically, the researchers concluded that exposure to body-focused social media prevented the progression of feeling better about your body as you move through postpartum. And this was from birth to 12 months postpartum. So these moms seeing these images of fit moms and, this is what I'm eating postpartum and this is my exercise routine, they felt horrible about themselves. And I mean, I experienced that too. It's not surprising to me that's what happened.
Yeah.
I just went on tragic. Instagram to look at that hashtag because I have never been exposed to that side of influencing until we started to talk about this for the episode. There's 29.5 million videos on Instagram tagged with the FitMom hashtag. And I pulled a couple of screenshots from Instagram that were, I didn't cherry pick this. So I just like scrolled a little and I was like, what are most of these posts? What do they look like? These women are toned up. I mean, like bikini style, lots of boobs, you know, six packs, big booties, muscly squat booties.
And you know, a lot of that, like some of this, like the one picture I'm looking at, which we'll put in the show notes, this lady looks like a power lifter athlete. Like she's like super toned, no body fat. But then other ones, you can achieve some of that through posing, lighting, and camera angle.
Yeah.
Like for me, someone who's super self-conscious and has been about, you know, my core not working anymore, essentially, you know, honestly, until now that I started to actually do the Bloom method, like a month ago, I can actually feel my deep core for the first time in 4 years. But like, if I took 10 seconds to suck in, stick up my butt and like twist, I could take a picture that looked pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But then I can only do that for so long because I have no control of my abdominal muscles. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I wonder how much of that is it realistic? But it certainly makes women feel pretty shitty about themselves when they see that. And it's not achievable or attainable for them.
If the listeners were interested, I think her name is Danae, Danea. I could be wrong.
Oh, Mercer?
You know, yes, Mercer.
Yes.
So she is someone who just, if you guys wanted to see what Hannah is talking about with the lighting and posing. So the only reason I know Danae was because when she was pregnant, she did our app. But she is wonderful because what she does is, and again, it's kind of that other end of the spectrum that I was talking about earlier that I still just like don't understand why we have to do it. But she will show you, and it's fascinating how she can pose and her body will look completely different. Like she could probably do a post where it's like, this was me right after having a baby. This is me a year after working out with so-and-so. And people would believe it because it is so insane what people can do with posing and lighting. Just be aware of that. Like, is what you're looking at. And now with filters, oh my gosh.
Don't get me started on that. That's
Is what you're looking at even real?
So Brooke, I wanted to ask you a question for listeners. So, you know, say they didn't do anything postpartum. They were scared to move or they were exhausted or they didn't have the resources. And now it's 4 or 5 years down the road and they still feel like their abdomen looks like they're 4 or 5 months pregnant. Can they fix that? Is there like a critical period healing that lower pelvic floor core that passes where you can't get it back again? Does that make sense? Like, is it too late? Is it at any point too late? Or is there hope for women who haven't been able to take care of themselves and rehab themselves?
No, there's always more than hope because you can just get results. There is never, it's never too late, ever. Here's what I tell people though. If you are someone who, even a year postpartum, so I don't care if you're a year or 12 years postpartum, what you are up against, if you choose to really rebuild that deep core foundation and then progress up, because that's the way that I would recommend doing it to really see results, you're probably going to deal with a mental component at some point because you have to scale back so much to get where you want to get. But I always tell women, if you are willing to scale back, start probably from a space that you have never started before. So beginner level that you're just like, what the heck? If you can just trust the process and you really give it your all, what you will see are several things. One, you will feel your core in ways that you have never felt your core before. You will feel your core respond to exercises that you've never felt. I love to utilize the plank as a good example. When I'm in a group fitness class, you guys, I've really got to learn to stay in my lane. It is like, it's tragic.
I would love to come to a group fitness class with you, by the way. Like, if we're ever in the same area, we are totally going to like an Orange Theory class.
So bad. Especially if I'm like comfortable enough with the coach because I'm kind of I'm not a loudmouth, but I'm so opinionated that I'm just like, what is going on right here? But my point is that the amount of times I will look around a room and witness women doing a plank where I'm like, none of these people have core engagement. There is nothing going on but a lot of stress to the back and their shoulders are on fire. So, because the plank is one of the most common core exercises. And we often will think, well, if I could just do a plank postpartum, I'd feel good. Holding a plank doesn't mean anything. Can you feel your deep core from your hip bones all the way up to your lower rib cage wrapping like a corset during a plank? Because if you cannot feel that, you got a lot of work that you can do to be able to get the results you want. And the reason I say that is I'm not trying to be this like crazy person that all your muscles have to be perfectly engaged in every exercise. But on the other side of what I do, I'm all about giving moms their life back. And so often in the fitness industry, women think they have to work out 5 to 7 days a week for an hour at a time to see results. They have to count their carbs, count their macros, all this crazy stuff. We ain't got time for that, you guys. It's 2024. So I am on this mission to teach women that you can work out for 30 and 35 minutes a day and achieve better results than someone who's in the gym 7 days a week for an hour at a time if you are efficiency over whatever the exercise is. So oftentimes, going back to your question, I will tell these women, even women on our app that are like, I'm in the rehab code, I'm in week 4, and I just really want more. Can I skip to the core code? Am I ready for that? And I'm like, if you cannot achieve a micro shake in your core and you still think that the exercises you're doing are easy and you can't make the easiest core exercise you are doing hard, no, you're not ready for it. But if you can, if you're like, this exercise is it can look so easy, I know how to make it really hard due to proper engagement of my deep core and, my breath patterns, etc. But I'm just ready for more, then yeah, go for more. Oftentimes we succumb to this narrative that is so much the fitness industry, that if you're not dripping sweat, if it's not hard, and hard is like, I can make a mountain climber hard and not have any core engagement. That doesn't mean that the mountain climber did anything other than take my breath away and make me sweat a little bit. Those should not be our markers. When we can move intentionally and optimize our movements to be as efficient as possible with the muscles that they are intended to recruit, that's when we see results. So if you're willing to scale it back, absolutely do what you need to do. You know what I mean? And no, it's never too late. I love guiding women. Recently we had a woman on our one-on-one support who was 67 years old. And she only came into our app because both of her daughters were currently pregnant and doing our app. And they had loved it so much that they told her about it. So she came in and basically had just been told she had prolapse. And she was like, I've never loved my core. Within 3 weeks, she's back on the one-on-one support being like, you need to turn your app into like older women stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. That would be a whole nother business. But I think the point is that when we can let go of the ego, when we can let go of the ego, anything is possible. Our bodies want to heal. Innately, they want to heal always.
Okay. So to sum all this up, tell people where they can find you. Let's let people know, because you are a trusted source of postpartum fitness and I would say even postpartum. Can I say rehabilitation? Is that like
for sure?
license?
Oh my goodness. I wish that was like more of a known term. Yes. So you can find us in multiple places. Of course, we're on social. We're on Instagram at The Bloom Method. We're a little bit on TikTok if you're a TikTok person. And our website, if you just love information, we of course have tons of information with blogs, etc. We're also a little bit on YouTube, and then our app, which is on our website. We do a 7-day free trial. So even if you just wanted to check it out and cancel before the 7-day free trial, it's the beauty of the modern free trial that you can do that. So yeah.
Your app is awesome. I love it. It's so easy to navigate. It's beautiful. It has so much good stuff.
Your sites too. They're really aesthetically like,
thank you.
Today I was like, I'm going to wear a calm color Sure.
Channel the Bloom method.
Thank you.
We'll
Same.
see you recording.
Bye, Brooke. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.